grew up in a haunted house. My family lived in the house from 1974 to, I think, 2005. This is the first time that any of this is really coming out.
Well, yeah, I appreciate your willingness to chat with me a little bit. I'm intrigued as to what'll come out of it. So,
well, I'm here to learn from you.
Well, yeah, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully I can add some insights maybe. So I guess for my side of things, would you like to kind of introduce yourself and then tell my audience, I guess, what line of work you come from and kind of, what your background is currently, and then we can delve into some of your past, which is the interesting part of today's conversation. So
okay, that's cool. My name is Sean Murphy. I'm a writer, an editor, a producer. I've written 14 produced feature films, 12 of which are in the produced ones that are faith-based. I also have worked on hundreds of hours of television shows, a lot for like TLC, like 90 Day Fiancé and Dr. Pimple Popper, shows like that. And I've also written a memoir called The Promise or Pros and Cons of Talking to God, which is sort of my testimony. And I have a novel coming out called Chapel Street. And Chapel Street is a story about a young man who's had a lot of suicides in his family, and it's kind of left him crippled. What he discovers throughout the course of the book was that it wasn't a case of mental illness in his family, but rather a multi-generational demonic curse. And what inspired me to write this book was I grew up in a haunted house. My family lived in the house from 1974 to, I think, 2005. I was out before then. And it was, sometimes extremely actively haunted. And I had two siblings who killed themselves. Yeah. And about 2.5 years ago, my mother asked me if I thought that the entity in the house was in any way responsible for the deaths of my siblings, at least in part. And my book, the novel, was a way of dealing with these issues in a fictional way.
Okay.
Because I had resolved, back in the 80s, I was not going to write about the entity. I was not going to write about it. But, so I dealt with it fictionally. And even though it's an exaggerated version, it's emotionally very true, and there's a lot of real stuff in it. And but as my wife's kind of nervous because we've had blowback spiritually whenever we've talked about this a lot.
Okay.
My wife called my pastor over. He suggested that since I've had these experiences, I should write a pamphlet about how Christians should deal with such circumstances.
Yeah.
Like this. So I started this series of blogs, interviewing my siblings. And I want to say that this is the first time that any of this is really coming out. I probably, of the dozens and dozens of stories you'd read in these blogs, I was probably only familiar with about 5 of them.
Okay.
Because we never talked about it, mainly because A, we didn't want people to think we were crazy. B, we were afraid that discussing it was empowering it. And C, that it would sometimes follow, which is, I'm learning now, is something symptomatic of demonic infestations, that what people would call ghosts or something generally stay in a single place. Yeah. But if something is demonic in nature, it can apparently follow. So that was another reason. And the fourth reason was guilt, because there were 8 of us. Originally when we moved in, there were 7 of us, 5 kids and 2 adults, and my brother was later born. And I say it was not one haunting because it was really 7 hauntings. My one brother had no experiences, my older brother.
Okay. He
left the house early. He had no experiences. And we never really discussed it except for a brief period. And it treated each of us differently. Mm-hmm. So it was a different set of experiences. And it's interesting now actually getting people to talk about it.
Yeah.
Similar and what isn't similar. And I've learned a lot about it. So that pretty much brings you up to speed now.
So I guess since I have you personally here, I was wondering if you could go through a few of your personal experiences that you had at the house, because I was reading through the blogs and it seemed like maybe you didn't have quite as many as a lot of the other members of your family, but you still did have some very significant experiences.
I'm really debating. I had like a sort of like a depressive breakdown, partly because of a romantic breakdown.
Okay.
Like 83, which almost resulted me within a hair's breadth of killing myself.
Okay.
I'd say only the miraculous intervention of God prevented it.
Yeah.
And anyone who wants to read about that, read my book, The Promise, or The Pros and Cons of Talking with God. That was part of the con area. And but really, it's the classic haunting story. Some of my siblings were bothered from day, essentially right at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But we were there, 84. I probably don't. It's hard to put the dates down because we never discussed it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Until about 1986, before I became really aware of what was going on at the house.
Yeah.
And it was after my mother and a friend of hers were using the Ouija board in the attic bed, then vacant attic bedroom.
Okay. Yeah.
From me, and they had a very wild response. It was definitely highly supernatural in the area.
Yeah.
And then it became, although it had always been there, it became a very intense, like poltergeist, exorcist type of situation. Beds bouncing.
Yep.
Beings, entities materializing. And for me, it starts like most hauntings, or, once again, hauntings in quotes.
Yep.
Quotes. With noises. I would hear, at first, animals moving. My bedroom was close to the roof. I would hear animals on the roof,
Okay.
And it would, like, literally every time I would close my eyes at night, I would hear them moving. When I opened my eyes, it would stop.
That's bizarre.
And I would be awake. But I'd close my eyes, and you could hear it walking, and in your mind you can follow where it is by following the noise. Whenever I walk over my eyes, it would stop.
Yeah.
And later it intensified that it was human footsteps up there.
Oh wow. Yeah.
So, and there's no way. This was a very high house. There was no way to access that roof. We did have an oak tree, but I don't think the branches extended over. It was a very high roof, and a very dangerous roof too. And there were other things that. It was really weird. It was like you've seen like a big boa constrictor.
Yeah.
It's in like 15 feet long. I would feel something like that in my mattress, and it would move. I would push aside. I could feel it moving beneath me.
Oh wow.
Many a morning I would like have that mattress down. This is how crazy this is, because I pull the mattress down. I'd be flipping it over to see like, how could something have gotten in there?
Yeah.
But it's insane to even think that, because how could anything that big gotten in my room to get into my mattress?
Right. Yeah.
I tore that mattress off that bed many a times and tried to figure out what was going on. But then, even at that time, there's a certain degree of deniability in what's going on.
Right.
And that's essentially, I would say that the warfare was mainly spiritual and psychological.
Yeah.
If you read these things, most of what happened in the house happened to one person at one time.
Yeah.
And very rarely were there events that a couple people witnessed at the same time.
Yeah.
So everyone thought they were going crazy.
Yeah.
But the thing that drove me over the edge, almost literally, was this was like after the footsteps. The bed stuff had already started. The bed would bounce sometimes too, not in a good way. And but I say 3 in the blogs, but I think it may have been as many as 5 nights in a row. My bedroom was on the 3rd floor. There was a flat roof of a sun porch after it. But after that, because our house was on a hill, there was a big drop.
Yeah.
And, and there was these metal stairs that took down from the porch and everything. And literally 3, I'm saying 3, but it could be 5 nights in a row. I woke up hitting my head or something, climbing out of that window.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And literally, and that's bad enough.
Right.
But what really freaked me out, and really what turned me to prayer, was that it was always 3 a.m. And after that, it was sort of, I really turned to prayer, and after a couple months, it essentially, the Lord protected me in the sense that it would not let it in my room.
Yeah.
And I tried not to invite it back in.
Yeah.
So, and it's weird, because it was a thinking entity. This was not energy. This was not, some blind force.
Right.
Because whatever it was, like when it was walking on the roof, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And you can ask yourself questions like, did I actually hear anything, or was it just projecting thought into my mind?
Right, right.
But it definitely did make noise, because there were certain things that, everyone in the house heard.
Yeah.
So either that, or we were all just thinking we were hearing it.
Right.
Whenever you think about what the physics are of something like this, or even the theology of it, you're really, it's all guesswork, and it's all,
yeah,
it's making a lot of suppositions.
I would agree with that, yeah.
I was pretty much spared, and I feel guilty about that, because once it was out of my room, I did actually pray, and I don't know where you stand on things like words of knowledge or things like that, theologically, but I did pray, why, I had 2 words from the Lord about this specifically. Mm-hmm. The first time I was trying to cast it out of the house, and the Lord told me it wasn't mine to cast out.
Interesting.
Another time, after it was a flare-up, not really involving me, but I knew stuff was going on. I said, Lord, why don't you just send this thing out of here?
Yeah.
And the Lord told me, you don't want it to go. You want to write about it.
Interesting.
And I was not actively writing at that time.
Right.
Now, the Lord did not say I couldn't write about it. That's gauging what was in my heart.
There you go. There's your caveat. Yep.
But that admonition is why I, like in my memoir, I did not write anything about this.
Okay. Yeah.
And when my mother asked that question, I didn't go straight to the actual haunting.
Yeah.
I went to the fictionalized version too.
Yeah.
Plus, I wanted to see if I could really deal with these issues.
Yeah.
Whether I was mentally prepared, spiritually prepared to. Because this was a very intense thing.
Yeah, I imagine.
As I said earlier, I have to look into it, whether it, wasn't partly responsible for the deaths of my 2 siblings.
Right.
And possibly my father as well. So, our family has paid a big toll from this thing.
Yeah, yeah.
My sister particularly, only is broken free of its psychological hold on her. My father always drank. His name was Doug Murphy.
Okay.
I think the last name should give an idea that he lived the Irish lifestyle, and as many of my family has.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he always drank.
Yeah.
But he had an aneurysm in it's either 82 or 83. After that, the alcohol affected him more. It wasn't like drunk or anything.
Yeah.
The aneurysm. But, I can't blame my father. After my sister's death in 94, I mean, imagine you lose your beloved daughter.
Right.
And then a couple years, to suicide.
Yeah.
There's if you're in a family with suicide, there's always, everybody wonders, why didn't they see it?
Right.
Why didn't they do something? What could they have done?
Right.
And then to lose your son afterwards.
Yeah.
The next sibling in line. So I would say he essentially drank himself to death. And I can't blame him. I don't know if I'd have the courage to survive that sort of circumstance. It took my mother, she had a lot of courage that, she was able to come through this. I'm curious as to your beliefs.
Okay, yep.
Do you have any training what are your thoughts about this?
Okay, yeah. So as far as training, I'll go into that a little briefly. I'll go into that briefly. I'm not an expert by any means, but I'm almost at my bachelor's level of Christian ministry. By the beginning of the summer, I should have my bachelor's degree in Christian ministry. So I've definitely studied theology and apologetics and ethics. And
well, if you've studied ethics, then you don't want to get into Christian films. Sorry, just kidding.
I can appreciate that. So I guess my initial thoughts would be, I would probably agree with you that it was more demonic, because I guess I would say on the topic of ghosts, I'm kind of agnostic. I don't know if I believe in ghosts or not, if we're defining ghosts as disembodied human spirits that are roaming the earth. I wrote down 3 verses that I found in the Bible that I was like, if I were to make the best case I could for ghosts, this topic comes up in Bible college and stuff, and the verses that they go to all the time are 1 Samuel 28, 3 through 25, which is the story of the witch of Endor bringing back Samuel so that Saul can talk to Samuel. I would agree that I think that is an instance of a definitional ghost. That would fit the bill of a ghost. My issue, I guess, with that instance is that it's a very specific instance in which it seems like God brought about something that maybe wouldn't normally happen. But then again, the witch seemed to be in the business of bringing back the dead, so you never know. And then the other verses that people would use to make an argument for ghosts would be the Gospels in Matthew 14 and Luke 24, where the disciples mistake Jesus for a ghost. And so that would kind of seem to lend to the idea that the disciples at least had an understanding of at least the lore of ghosts. So, you'd have to wonder where that came from.
What about the Transfiguration?
Yeah, I thought about that one too. I think there could definitely be an argument made there. You'd have to...
Moses was dead.
Right, yeah. I did think about that one. I was going to add that one, and then I thought later, I was like, I don't know if when they were transfigured, they came back in like a physical bodily form like Jesus did after he resurrected, or if they were truly just like spirits. I'm not entirely sure. So that's the only reason I didn't include that one, but yeah, that one would certainly work, I think, in an argument for ghosts. It's kind of funny because before I started like looking up some things like for this conversation we were having, I was like, I definitely don't believe in ghosts, and now I would call myself a ghost agnostic, because I think there are evidences that you could definitely make an argument for ghosts in the Bible, a biblical argument for ghosts. But like you said, a lot of your siblings and a lot of your family and friends, it's not really even an issue of like whether it was a ghost or not, because they were like, it's probably demonic. So in that case, I wouldn't see a reason to disbelieve that conclusion, I guess, or a reason to doubt that conclusion, because like I said, in my experience as a missionary kid, I personally have never had an encounter, like a blatant encounter with the supernatural, but my mom has, my dad has, fellow missionaries definitely have. I mean, my mom was called to basically a suicide. A young lady drank, I think it was pesticide, to kill herself, and at a certain point realized that she had made a mistake. And so her family called my parents in the middle of the night, and at that point they couldn't do anything for her. She was already dying, but when she finally did die, my mom said she looked up and saw a demon. And so there's, stories from just my childhood of being a missionary kid on the mission field that, I definitely don't doubt the existence of demons. I think they're very real and very active. So, yeah, based on, what I read in your blogs and stuff, it's like I would have no reason to believe it wasn't demonic, because, the things that were happening, they were very not normal occurrences, one might say. I've never experienced anything like them for sure, so.
Yeah, unlike you, I'm very agnostic on ghosts.
Yeah.
I think if you look at modern evangelical thought, in my opinion, looking at it, people's opinion on really of what happens to a person after they die comes almost entirely, our viewpoint as, and I'm saying evangelicals as if you are one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it comes from really the rich man and Lazarus. There's a barrier that no one can cross.
Right.
But I'm like, you can't use that as an evidence because it's a parable.
Right.
It was not telling us really what happens after you're dead. It was more, it was more about judgment and those that, how you're punished or rewarded for things.
Right.
And when it says you can't go back, you send Lazarus back. It's obvious that what he's saying is that someone is going to come back, Jesus, and they're not going to listen to him.
Yeah.
More than they would listen to Lazarus if he came back.
Yeah.
So, to me, I can't use that as a definitive statement on ghost and death. And obviously, Christian sects believe a great deal of different things regarding after the dead. 7-day event. Not just a 7-day event. Other people believe in soul sleep too.
Right.
Things like that, which I don't believe in. So, there's a lot of room for error. And even when I did enjoy your recent video cast about can Satan be saved?
Yeah.
But even in that, you have a lot of suppositions.
Right.
You're making
Very
a lot
true.
of logical leaps based on a lack of evidence.
Yeah.
Lack of things.
I would agree with you there. That's fair. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you.
And I would say that if you look at, and even if you do a very wide interpretation of what is talking about the demonic, including the old gods and everything, the idols, if you look at all of that, how many words? It can't be in the Bible more than like 1,000 or 2,000 words out of the entire Bible that deal with these issues.
Yeah.
And think about it. Now, just normal Christian thought is that, there is an entire unseen realm, and of which there are millions, hundreds of millions, possibly billions of, entities that have free will.
Yeah.
Think about if you were given the task of describing the interrelationships, the corporate relationships, interrelationships, economies, and this and that of the human race.
Yeah.
Of us, the billions of us, and said you have to describe this in its detail. You only have 2,000 words.
Right.
would only be skimming the surface.
Right.
It's, and in theory, there is already, because there are structures and hierarchies in the demonic realm. That's clear from the Bible.
Yeah. But
there are so few passages to explain any of it. What does Paul say in 1 Corinthians that we're like looking through a mirror darkly? There are things we don't know. I'm going to trust that we're pretty much given what we need to know.
Right, yeah.
We do not have enough. I don't have right now enough answers to explain what happened to us, because particularly in the New Testament, any demonic things tend to deal with possession.
Right, yeah, that's very true.
I do not believe anyone in our family was actually possessed.
Right.
But it definitely, the place was possessed. The ground was possessed.
Yeah.
The house was possessed. And I have evidence, not evidence, but, anecdotal evidence that it was not just our house, but it was other property there too.
Right, yeah.
So,
yeah, that is very interesting, because like you said, in the Bible, it is mainly like on a personal level that you see demon interaction. It's not that they're dwelling in a certain place necessarily. I did think of the one verse. I'd have to read the context again to get a clear picture of this, but there is that verse that says a devil leaves his house and wanders in vast spaces, and then comes back with 7 devils more evil than himself. I considered that one. I was like, I think traditionally that one's taken to mean people, like possession of a person. But I was like, I don't know. I'd have to look at the context. Maybe it could mean that a demon is inhabiting an actual house too. I'm not sure. I'd have to look at that more clearly.
Well, there's some thought, people that look at the Old Testament in particular, or the way that the ancient Hebrews did, it deals more with, and as Paul said, those who worship idols are worshiping demons. That there's some people have this thought based on some Old Testament things. I haven't really studied it because I'm really trying to avoid looking into it at this time. I want to take everything I'm coming in now at face value.
Yeah.
And my problem, it wasn't a problem, but when I was looking at my own experiences, I only viewed them through my, I made a lot of suppositions based on my own experience through my religious viewpoint.
Right.
So I put everything in a box.
Yeah.
And I'm deliberately this time just trying to get the people to tell their stories and look at it. Like, if you would have asked me in 1987 how many things were in the house, I would have said one. There was only one thing in the house.
Yeah.
And if I would have thought that anybody who felt there was another thing, that it was just a guise. It was the same thing.
Yeah.
However, now after actually getting people's stories and stories they haven't even told each other, I'm reasonably certain there were at least 2 in the house. There was one on the second floor that lived in a series of 3 closets that were joined together.
Okay.
It seemed to be that's place. And there was a second one that lived in the 3rd floor front bedroom in that closet.
Yeah.
And I could tell, because the thing on the 2nd floor, when it manifested itself, it always manifested itself in a certain way. Yeah. And there was something on the 3rd floor. When it manifested itself in another way.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it makes me think there were 2 of them.
Yeah.
Also, I'm trying to look at it the way like a biologist would look at it.
Yeah.
A new insect or something.
Yeah.
For example, it's funny because I've been a skeptic all my life about these things. I never believed in a single haunting or demonic activity except the one I lived through.
Okay. Yep.
People would tell me these stories and I would roll my eyes, but a lot of these things I dismissed in other people's hauntings. My siblings are telling me what happened to them. And it's sort of like the women, like my niece and my mother, it would get into bed with them.
Yeah.
It would cuddle and or fondle them sexually.
Yeah, I read that in the blogs, yeah.
That reminded me of the early Bible thing in Genesis about how the sons of man, sons of God, found the women of thing. Now, at no time did it, it was in my bed or in my mattress.
Yeah.
But at no time was it like touching or fondling any of the males.
Right. Family. Yeah.
So that was odd. And also, it would do mimicked speech.
Yeah.
It would talk to some people, in the voice of someone they knew.
Yeah.
And I thought that it only spoke to the women. Mm-hmm. But I subsequently, one of my late brother's friends mentioned, even before this really came up in the blogs, something like saying that he was hearing his mother's voice and his grandmother. My brother had some psychological problems that they were he would hear them talking when he was in that. We call the third floor front bedroom, the hell room.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, you don't get the nickname the hell room. You know,
right.
That's one you earn.
Right.
But when he was sleeping up there, he was saying he could hear his mother and his grandmother's voices.
Interesting.
They were going to put him away. So whatever it was feeding on his paranoia. Whatever it was, it was intelligent.
Yeah.
It would react to things you would do.
Yeah.
It would make you, even if it didn't speak with you, it would make you offers.
Yeah.
You know, like at one point, you know, when it was slow, I'd say, well, there's nothing in here. Because if it was in here, we would turn the lights on.
Yeah.
Turn the light on.
Oh, geez, yeah.
And it was very much an invitation. It was sort of like an unspoken invitation. It's like, why don't you see what else I can do?
Right, right.
You know, but I was smart enough. It's like, oh crap, you know, I'm not. It's sort of like, you know, I kind of knew it would do it.
Right.
But it's sort of like, I had protection at that time.
Right.
And it's like, if I were to start to like engage it, I'm sure this protection I had would have dropped away. And the woman who gave an interview, who was not a family member, who gave the blog number 20 interview, a friend of my brother's, she also felt, you know, that God protected her from whatever it was.
Yeah.
And certainly my niece, she was also a young Christian as well.
That's cool.
So there was protection, but I believe that there was more than one. I think it treated women different than men. It never materialized to me in the house. It never spoke to me in a voice in the house. As I said, I didn't see it in any of its forms.
Yeah.
But it almost, you know, but it put me out that window 3 to 5 times.
Right. Yeah.
You know, so it would have killed me. And what is really interesting is there are a number of suicide events, you know, which are things that people didn't will to do necessarily.
Right. Yeah.
However, if they had happened, it would have been viewed as suicide.
Yeah, I remember reading about those. You said, I think it was your mother had an instance of her brakes going out one time that she viewed that way. Yeah, that's scary stuff. That's
me out the window. My little brother John in the hell room. Lifted up and thrown against the wall.
Yep.
And you know, this is what really made me decide to do the blogs. Because what he said is, because I was over at my sister's house, that's the first time he related this story, and he hit the mirror right next to the window, and he said, you know, if I'd have gone out that window, people would have thought I killed myself because I was that age. And I'm like, well, I think we're going to look into my siblings' deaths. Yeah. It's funny because people's attitudes within the family, some are believe, you know, to me, when you add up these suicide events, when you add up what my brother was saying, the voices were telling him when he was living in that room.
Yeah.
You know, to me, it's becoming clear. I'll never be able to prove it. All I'm trying to do is prove it to myself and family. It's sort of like anyone else who reads this is just a spectator. These series of blogs are really a debate inside my family.
Yeah.
You know? And my nieces have heard all this. You know, I've heard rumors and whispered things, and they finally want to, you know, people want to know what really happened. So I'm letting it out now. So it's not me, it's all of us.
So that kind of brings me to like this idea of like motivation, you know, because that's one thing that's perplexed me, I guess, when I hear stories like this, is like, what could the motivation, if we're settling on the demonic, you know, what is the motivation of the demonic at that point in doing these things, you know, because this doesn't happen to everybody, you know, it's never happened to me, it's never happened to a lot of other Christians I know, but it does happen to some people, obviously. I was wondering if you had any speculations on that, and then I was maybe going to speculate.
Okay, I have two thoughts. One, and this is another murky area, is generational curses and generational blessings.
Okay.
And you hear this all the time.
Yeah.
That there are certain people, particularly females, are quote unquote gifted, you know, have psychological spiritual or psychic gifts.
Yeah.
And this is something I knew my mother had talked about this, and she had said her grandmother was born under the veil. But I never realized this about my sister or my nieces until we had these blogs.
Yeah.
And they're coming forward. My one niece, Natalie, who was like the third one that's listed her on the thing, she didn't even discuss that because there were issues. I'm like, why did you bring it up in the interviews? But she knows I'm going to interview everyone a second time when it comes to deal with the deaths. And she goes, I was going to bring some of these incidents up when we talk about the deaths. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. But it's really shocking. So that's one thing. I say in the blogs a couple times that these kind of, and I'm using once again the word hauntings because it's just the only one that seems to fit.
Right.
Are some degree transactional.
Yeah.
You know, and that you have to be kind of attuned to it. But then the evidence also defeats that as well, because, you know, I don't think I have any other than blessings from the Lord. I don't think I have any psychic ability.
Yeah.
My brother John, who had very intense experiences in the house, had no psychic ability. My father, who never discussed any of this, but as I'm learning about his behavior as a result of these blocks, would have looked at me like I was crazy if I thought he'd say he had psychological gifts. So, we were all affected.
Yeah.
But we did not have those gifts.
Yeah.
So, but I do believe that the women were perhaps affected more because of it.
Yeah.
I really think in this case, whatever's there was at the place.
Yeah. Right.
Whatever it was already there when we were there. And I think how you reacted to it may be a factor, or what internal spirit, where you are internally, spiritually. But what about my little brother? He was a child.
Right.
He was a baby. And it was there he was like essentially aware of it his entire life.
Yeah.
So what did he do to cause it to come to him?
Right.
Nothing. He did nothing.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on this?
In thinking about it, I was like, it would be interesting to know whether, you thought it was tied to the house or to the people. So you think it was tied to the house. As a Christian, I would say there's a definite spiritual reality to life. There's, people exist in both a physical and spiritual, as well as emotional and psychological states. The fact that, there had been deaths in the house, there was a funeral in the house. I think it's likely that something demonic like that could attach itself to tragedy, to a tragic situation. Yeah. And, like we said, this is all speculation because the Bible really doesn't talk a lot about this. It seems logical in my mind that could be the case. I mean, the demonic, they're entities that, are seeking evil. They're seeking, destruction. It's very likely to me that they could be attached to tragic events. And so I guess my thought would be that's probably how they became attached to that house, if they were indeed attached to that house. And then probably like various things in your family, then like, I guess, we could use the terminology, like it fed off of that, maybe. I think the demonic could almost like heighten what already exists, right? So, you said there was some psychological issues your one brother had, and then there was depression that various people experienced in the house. And it's like, I almost wonder, it's like, you said some of those things ran in the family too, like depression and things like that. And I almost wonder if it's not the case that, if that demonic entity was attached to that house, that it just did various things to heighten all of those emotions to like, level 10. Like specific motivation of the demonic, I would say it's almost as if it plays on the fact that you can never really prove these things, right? It almost plays on the fact that it does just enough so that it's there, like you yourself know it's there, but you can never really prove it to anybody else other than to just have people experience it, And so it's almost as if they're spiritual beings who give you just enough to believe in to keep you wondering and keep you guessing and keep you intrigued, but they don't give you quite enough to like prove themselves to you or to prove like a supernatural reality to you. I would say the ultimate strategy that I could think of would maybe is that it's a distraction, right? It's trying to distract you from maybe other important things in life, like just the Christian life. So I think like the main motivation would just be like, it's almost like it's trying to separate you from other people. It's trying to distract you from what might be more important. And it's just trying to make itself enough known so that it just keeps you wondering, it's like, it's trying to put you in an uneasy state so that you're never quite sure of anything and you always just kind of wonder. And it's a distracting state, I would say. It almost seems like that would be a strategy, like a viable strategy that the demonic would have, would be to distract and just to keep you not focused on things maybe you should be focused on, and keep you in a state of fright potentially too, because when you're afraid, you're not really thinking of other things. It's kind of a fight or flight kind of thing, it's keeping you just on your toes. So. Well,
I would say that it's motivation. Well, one thing I would say is that one thing is clear, which also plays into my suicide theme, is that it definitely seemed to be trying to isolate us psychologically, spiritually.
Yeah.
Not only, say from God, but also from each other.
Right. Yeah.
But its motivations was very clear. That's one thing. One thing I always ask everyone I interview is, or most of them, is was this thing intelligent?
Yeah.
And they're like, yes. And I often ask, I think pretty much all my family members ask, what did it want?
Yeah.
And I think two of them said they wanted my soul.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I think the other one said it wanted to kill me.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And it definitely wanted to kill me.
Yeah.
It wanted to kill us. And I don't think it can physically kill us. I think it has to get us to either kill each other or kill ourselves. And so that, and this is, why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous, it's a very slippery slope that a lot of people go on, particularly Christians, that mental illness is all, there's a lot of Christians who don't believe in mental illness.
Right.
And they will say that any mental illness is demonic.
Yeah.
And I definitely believe that is not true.
Yeah, same here.
However, I think mental illness can weaken you to make you more susceptible. In my book, Chapel Street, which will be coming out July 2020.
There you go.
Ding, ding, ding. Let's get the plug in.
Yep.
I really try to go, that edge between mental illness and demonic activity. But I will also say I was in a charismatic prayer group,
mm-hmm.
and this was right before my brother noticed that he was had his mental issues. There was a woman there who had bipolar mental issues, and
mm-hmm.
When people would be like praying in tongues, and that's right, I don't know.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But people would be praying in tongues. I would be near her, and she would start saying all this weird satanic stuff.
Huh. Interesting.
Anytime people went into tongues, she would go into like a satanic trance.
Weird.
And I'm not saying that's symptomatic of everyone.
Right.
It certainly isn't. But it was scary.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was freaky. I will say that. So,
yeah.
But I don't want to fall into the category of so many people who are dismissive of mental illness. It does exist, and I don't limit God's ability to perform miracles.
Yeah.
However, if a doctor is telling me that I'm on an antibiotic now, and if the doctor prescribes it, I'm sure the Lord wanted me to have it. Yeah, so if anyone who's mentally ill who read my book and want to learn more about me and thinks you shouldn't take your medicine, you're not getting that from me. Stay on the medicine. Also, too, back to your theory. The only problem with your theory is that it seems to be in more than one house. So it wasn't drawn to the tragedy in that house. It could have been some tragedy on that land, 50 years or 100 years or 300 years beforehand. And also, too, and this is some preliminary research from the old days, is that because I read they make the Warrens. Are you familiar with the Warrens?
Yep.
I read their book, The Demonologist, at the height of this, and because I didn't think it was that bad, and I read their levels of demonic activity, and we were in the red zone.
Oh no!
We were when things like this are happening, someone usually ends up dead.
Oh man!
Suicide or murder, and I'm like, oh man,
yeah.
That's got doubled my prayers. But also too, I think sometimes it could be attributed to an object, like an idol or something that was endowed with through some sort of occultic practices or something.
Yeah, I think it just maybe this whole situation just shows maybe how much of spiritual reality we just don't understand. Because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day, and she comes from a background where she did a lot of religious searching, and New Age kind of belief was one of those things. And I was telling her about an experience that I had recently where I had a very direct and quick answer to prayer, and I was telling her how bizarre that was to me, and it was a circumstance that happened through other people. So I asked something of God, and then the answer came very quickly, very directly through two people I met in the park one day, and I was like, isn't that bizarre? And she's like, when I was practicing New Age belief and stuff like that kind of thing would happen to me all the time. She was like, I would get a feeling about somebody, and then they'd show up, and we'd chat or something, and I was just like, I guess that took me by surprise, because I was like, I guess I've never thought of that before, that obviously there is a spiritual element to people, and it's maybe naive to think that just just Christians experience the spiritual aspect.
Did you read my book?
No, I didn't. I have not read that yet.
I would be curious to see what you think of it, because
I definitely
particularly in the light of these, because I've really wrestled with it. Basically, the thing is that I had a very active born again experience. In a sense. I would pray and God would answer. I mean, He would. It isn't like we'd have 18-page conversations,
right.
But I could ask a question and I would get a direct answer back. I had a very interesting life in prayer and answered prayer, being told what would happen tomorrow, today.
Yeah.
Being worried about something and God saying, don't worry, this is what's going to happen. Powerful as this thing was in the house, it couldn't have pulled off the things God was pulling off in my life. It couldn't, this thing couldn't manipulate as many things that God was manipulating. So do you believe God can communicate still? You're not a cessationalist.
No. Yeah, I definitely believe that God can communicate still and does. I mean, like I said, it's interesting because my family has had a lot more experience with this kind of thing than I have. Like my mom, I think she's seen visions. My dad has had dreams. My brother, when he was very young, heard the voice of God, like the audible voice of God. But yeah, it's been interesting because I have never had an experience like that, I don't think. And I grew up always wanting one, and then I've realized, reading the Old Testament, it was the pattern of the Israelites to have very blatant encounters with God and then right after turn away from God very easily. And so I was like, because I guess I always thought, I was like, if I could just have like a sign or something, then like I would be good for the rest of my life. I would be, I would have no doubts after that. And then I was like, that's obviously not true. God could speak to me, and then the next day I could, just have as many doubts because I'm human. So
I think you should read my book, because I call it The Pros and Cons of Talking with God.
Right.
There's a good side to it, but there's also a bad side to it. One thing is that you don't have any excuses. If God tells you something and you don't do it, you have no one to blame but yourself.
That's very true.
And I'm Arminian, but I say I live like a Calvinist. The older I get, the more I realize that, I do believe we have choice.
Yeah.
Because certainly not do what you should do.
Right.
But I do believe that as I look at my life, that God's in charge no matter what. My wife wants to clean up some of this. Let's not let him see these Pure Flix residual checks. Do we have any whiskey or anything I can put behind me?
Yeah, I got Bob Dylan's whiskey.
No, let's not do it. Some Christians might be watching.